Hello and welcome to my March reading wrap-up. Thank you so much for joining me. March was a very busy and productive month. I actually read far more than I had expected, which was a nice surprise. I haven't gotten back to doing my live streams yet, so that gave me a little bit of extra time to work on other projects, and I may be starting the lives again soon. Still debating on when that date will be. I'll talk a bit more about that at the end of the video if you're interested. I became involved in my first reading event through BookTube, as although I've been on YouTube for close to 2 years. In fact, April the 7th will be my 2-year anniversary, but I've just recently, in the last 2 months-ish, become involved with the BookTube community, which has been a very positive experience. I decided to get involved with March Mystery Madness. Mystery isn't typically the type of book I read, but as I mentioned in my review of these works, it worked out perfectly. A nice little bit of synchronicity for those who have read the Celestine Prophecy, as I found The Bone Code by Kathy Reichs and the Scarpetta collection by Patricia Cornwell. I found both of these at my local thrift store, and yes, I am happy that it cost me $10 for the 2 books together, so that was an amazing deal. I've already done a review on both of those books, so again, I'll put the card to that. I also found Of Mice and Men at my local thrift store, and this is another book on my 24 in 24 to read list. As you can see, it's a short read, and I managed to finish it in an afternoon. I've heard of this book before, I've just never gotten around to reading it. This is by John Steinbeck. On the inside of this Penguin Books edition, it talks about the author, his date of birth, the various books that he had written. So it just gives a little bit of background information. This is rather interesting. So it was first published in the United States in 1937. It was then published by Viking Press, 1938, and it was first published by Penguin Books in 1978. So this has been published a number of times. It was an interesting story about 2 men and their relationship and difficult choices. The story itself has a lot of information to share in a variety of ways. Some may find it off-putting. Personally, what I found the biggest challenge about this book is how animals are treated. So if issues with animals are a trigger for you, as they are for me, it's not a book I would recommend unless you can read past that part and look at the bigger message and information that the author is trying to share. Because I do think what he has to say about the relationship and the times is important. And no, I don't think it should be changed. I'll talk more about that when I review this particular book. Another book that I read in March is Lord of the Flies. I borrowed it from my public library. I do remember reading this book before. I believe it was in public school when we did it. Might have been grade 6 or 7. And the book always stood out, and I remembered that book in particular because we're looking at choices that people make when they're put into a certain circumstance. In this case, it's young boys. Their plane has been shot down, and they find themselves on a deserted island. I believe it's an important read. I believe it is an important discussion in classrooms, in other places as well. And I'll talk more about why that particular book had a challenge made against it here in Canada. After reading a number of different banned books over the last few months, like 1984, Lord of the Flies, reading Kathy Reichs and Patricia Cornwell, which is forensic science and murder, I needed to get into some different kinds of reads. And for me, what I read to relax are ghost stories. Lucky for me, I had found a number of new to me books at my local thrift store. So Ghost Stories of Pennsylvania, I very much enjoyed this. One, because these are actual ghost stories, not made up. The author includes pictures of the locations, and I really enjoyed learning about not only the ghosts of Pennsylvania, but some of the history about that state as well. Next was Fireside Ghost Stories. Now, these are fictional, written by A.S. Mott. I just realized Ghost Stories of Pennsylvania was written by Dan Asfar. This is book 21 of the Ghost House series. Back to Fireside Ghost Stories, this is book 37. And as I say, she wrote the stories. There were some that, as you can see, I found quite interesting and enjoyable. And I don't know, maybe after I've finished doing some of my Fairy Tale Monday videos, I may start moving to some fireside ghost stories. Let me know in the comments down below if that sounds of interest to you. Another book was Ontario Fireside Ghost Stories. Now this is by Barbara Smith, and it's book 79 of the Ghost House series. I have two other Barbara Smith books. I know I've read two of her other ghost story books, and those are based on actual events and information she got from people sending it in to her. This particular book is a collection of fictional stories that she has written herself, so possibly based on the other information that she gathered. It was a different kind of read, possibly because I've read her nonfiction ghost stories. I have to say, I enjoyed her nonfiction books more than I did this particular collection. Hi, Tiki. What do you think? But there were some good stories in it, so if you enjoy ghost stories, again, she's another author to check out. This month, I also managed to finish my Jules Verne box collection. So the last book I needed to finish was Around the World in 80 Days, which means now I can prepare for my Jules Verne box set reading summary video. So that will be in the next few weeks, hopefully. It was an interesting read. For some reason, I was thinking of a hot air balloon, and I don't know why. Because this literally is about the journey around the world on boats and trains and other means of transportation. So this actually was one of my favorite reads, next to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, from Jules Verne. Then, because I still needed a bit of a break from some of the really making me think a lot banned books that I've been reading in terms of what Orwell was thinking the world was going to be like, and a variety of other things. So I decided it was time to revisit some of my favorite horror authors. I have been reading Stephen King since Carrie was first published, and I read it not long after it became available. Yes, I am that old, and I'm good with that. I have to say, turning 60 has not bothered me a single bit. I thought turning 50 was cool, turning 60 even better. But back to Stephen King. Although I had continued to read him and the works that had come out right up to the last book I think I read by him was Dolores Claiborne, and then I started getting into other authors. So I've just been going back to revisit him in the last couple of years. Of course, I started back with Salem's Lot, which was the second book after Carrie. I loved it when I read it the first time, and I loved it reading it again all these decades later. The Dark Half is a book that I hadn't read by Stephen King before. I've seen the movie, and it was actually cool. As I was reading the book, I watched the movie partway through. So it was great being able to do the comparison of what happens in the book versus how they portrayed it in the movie. I'll talk more about that when I do a review of The Dark Half. Next, I read Mr. Mercedes. Last year, I borrowed If It Bleeds, It Leads by Stephen King, and it's a collection of short stories, which I enjoyed. In there is the character Holly, but I've read that book a little while ago, so I'm going to have to borrow it again to refresh my memory of how she relates in there. And I hadn't read Mr. Mercedes before, so this was another new-to-me Stephen King book. Book, Songs, and Other Magic, Gareth, has done a video about this, so check out his channel if you're interested for a little more information about it. I have to admit, it was almost one of those books where I hopped ahead to the last chapter before deciding if I was going to finish it, because as I mentioned with Of Mice and Men, issues with animals trigger me. There was a thing on that I'd seen years ago, back when I had a Facebook account, and I can't remember how it's worded, but basically it doesn't matter how many people die as long as the dog survives. That's me. And it doesn't mean that I don't have empathy or that type of thing. It's the fact that I know it's not real, and these people aren't really dying because it's fiction or science fiction. But if it has an animal, then I just can't deal with it. In fact, I'm probably one of those kids who missed the ending of a lot of Wonderful World of Disney movies, because once something started, the air kind of turned blue, if you know what I mean, and I got to go up to my room. Yeah, there's a reason I read a lot of books when I was younger and continue to read as I'm older. How I ever managed to finish Old Yeller is beyond me at this point, because now as soon as I either see a show where they have a pet or I start reading a book and they have an animal, it's like, don't know if this is for me. As things progress in the story and I realize the animal is safe, no, I didn't cheat. And I'll talk more about both Mr. Mercedes and The Dark Half in an upcoming video. The next author I revisited is Dean Koontz. I had read a number of his books also back in the early 1980s, actually probably throughout the 80s, maybe even into the early 1990s. I enjoyed his writing style. I enjoyed how he kept the story going. So when I saw 3 of his books for $1 at my local thrift store, I decided it was a great time to revisit an old friend. I started with Winter Moon. In the beginning, it seemed pretty good. And again, I'll talk more about this when I get to the particular review of this book. But yes, Koontz again has a dog in his book. And having started Stephen King's Mr. Mercedes. So when it came to potentially an issue with the dog in Winter Moon, I put it aside for a little bit. Then I came back, started reading because I wanted to get it finished. I couldn't take the suspense anymore. So yes, I cheated. I read the last chapter to decide whether I was going to finish reading the book. Let me know in the comments down below. Are there books where you've wanted to finish the story, but you had to know how it ended in case maybe you weren't going to finish it and hopped ahead to the last chapter? I don't do it often. I have to admit, I'm usually pretty good. Like I said, I stuck with Mr. Mercedes until the end without hopping through, but when it came to the dog in Winter Moon, I had to know. Another book that I borrowed from the library was Paulo Coelho. I really need to figure out how to pronounce his name properly. Was The Devil and Miss Prym. Like all of the other books that I have read by Paulo, it was an amazing read. I enjoy parables, stories with lessons. That's why I enjoyed The Celestine Prophecy, The Alchemist, The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. They're just a great way to enjoy a different location, a different perspective, and then walk away with something that you can incorporate into your everyday life. I'll talk more about The Devil and Miss Prym when I get to covering a number of Paulo's books, as I've now read several. I very much enjoyed them, and I'm not sure whether I'll do them a bit more in detail each as I did with The Alchemist. I'll include that card up here as well, or whether I'll just do a quick, here are the books and how they were laid out. If you've seen my video, The Alchemist, let me know what you would like to see when I cover the works by this particular author. The last book that I finished in April was going back to reading the 24 in 2024. It's The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. This was another book. I had to know how it ended. Now, I'm doing it as a buddy read with Book Blather, Dave and Olive, as well as Revenant Reads, Verne. So I'm not going to say anything about this book, and it'll be a while before I do a video about it. But I had to know how it ended, so I stayed up until 1 o'clock the other night to finish it. And no, I didn't pop ahead to the last chapter to find out, which is why I just kept plowing through it, because I had to know. And again, like so many of the other banned books that I've read, it was a reread for me, not new to me. So again, I was revisiting content I'd read before. As it says on the back, so I'm not giving away any spoilers, now in a book that is at once mordant satire and dire warning, she has created an Orwellian 1984 as seen by women in the near future. I probably read The Handmaid's Tale about the same time I'd read 1984 by George Orwell. And for me, that was back in 1983. So now revisiting these books makes me sound old, but yes, 40 years later. Well, 41 if you go to 1983. I have to say, I enjoyed the read. If you've watched Book Blather, Dave and Olive, what I will say, because Olive likes a certain type of book, she's a sassy little girl, there are parts she's going to enjoy in this when they're reading it together. So, Olive, I know you're going to love this read, and I'm looking forward to having our group discussion about your thoughts on the book. Be sure to check out both Book Blather and Revenant Reads. They have great content. That is my March reading wrap-up. I'm very excited to say that of the, 12 books that I read in March, 2 were from the public library. 11 were from my own library, so yay me, who is still working on reading all the books that I personally own. That was a goal that I started for myself in January 2022. Of course, that goal keeps stretching because, as you can see here, I keep going to my local thrift store, so the number of books I own keeps going up. And I will be doing a thrift store video very shortly to let you know about those new titles. So now I am finished 7 of my 24 banned books to be read in 2024. And I am now up to 30 out of 50 of my book challenge goal on Goodreads. So as I say, it was a very productive, great reading month. The live streams, now April the 7th will be my 2-year anniversary on YouTube. And although I was kind of hoping I would be celebrating 200 subs at that point, it wasn't meant to be, and that's okay. As I had just commented with someone else recently, when it comes to trying to figure out the YouTube algorithm or analytics, that's just a hop and a skip to crazy town. There's no point getting stressed out about the numbers. The only one that I tend to focus on are the returning viewers. I appreciate the comments. I appreciate the people who sub to the channel. They are the reason I continue to make videos. So as long as I know that there are people who are returning to the channel, enjoying the content, even if they don't leave me comments, I know they're coming back because I can see it in the statistics. I do enjoy reading comments and I do respond to them. So if you're comfortable sharing your thoughts or even an emoji or a happy face, that would be awesome, because it is likes and comments that get the content out to more people. But I do understand that not everybody is comfortable putting a comment down below. And as I say, I'm okay with that. As I put at the end of my videos, and I sincerely mean it, I appreciate the gift of your time. So if you're still watching, thank you so much, because I know there are millions of other channels you could be watching right now and a number of other things that you could be doing. I've also come to realize that there are some people who listen to my videos as they're driving to and from work, or some people have my videos on in the background as they're at work, which I think is interesting, and I very much appreciate it, because as I was thinking about that the other day, I realized YouTube has become the new radio. I know myself, when I'm doing things, I either have a CD going, sometimes I'll have YouTube going, but I have some kind of sound in the background. So thank you so much to those who have found me to be of benefit and that sound in the background to help you through your day. In terms of the live streams, I had considered doing that on April the 7th. However, that's a Sunday. In my home, that's chill out and read and cuddle with Cat Day. I am considering doing a live on Tuesday afternoon around 3 p.m. That's Eastern Standard Time. We'll see how that goes. I know when I was doing them on Fridays and I tried it for several months, they were quite quiet. If you can join me, that would be amazing. And if not, if you're on the rewatch, I appreciate that as well. If you've enjoyed this video, if you've read any of the books that I've mentioned, be sure to give that like button a little tickle. Leave me a comment down below if you're comfortable doing so. Also, if you haven't already subscribed and you enjoy bookish content, someone who is quirky and eclectic, that's right, JP, I'm sticking with that line, and you enjoy nature videos as well as silly cats, I have their videos on Fridays. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you know when I upload content that may be of interest to you. Until next time, happy reading and be sure to take good care.